Hey guys, most people don't break in dramatic moments, they break quietly. In the small decisions they make every single day. They break when they choose comfort over discipline, distraction over clarity, and approval over truth. And if you pay attention, you can see it everywhere. In the way people react too quickly, in the way they let words control their emotions, in the way they collapse under pressure that was never meant to destroy them in the first place. But here is the truth that most will never admit: mental strength is not something you are born with. It is something you build. And the reason most people never become unbreakable is not because life is too hard, but because they never learn how to train their mind the way a Stoic would. If you have ever felt like you are different, like you see through the noise, like you are tired of being controlled by emotions, by other people's opinions, by situations you cannot control, then this message is for you. Because what you are about to hear is not motivation, it is transformation. Centuries ago, a Roman emperor named Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself in the middle of the war, not to inspire others, but to survive his own thoughts. And what he discovered was something simple yet powerful. You do not control what happens to you, but you always control how you respond. And yet today, most people live the opposite way, reacting to everything, letting every inconvenience feel like a personal attack, letting every setback define their identity. They chase comfort, they avoid discomfort, and in doing so, they unknowingly train themselves to be fragile. Because fragility is not an accident, it is a habit, just like strength is a habit. And that is where everything begins to change. Because once you understand that your mind can be trained, that your reactions can be controlled, that your perspective can be reshaped, you stop seeing yourself as a victim of life and start seeing yourself as someone who can master it. In this journey, you will not find shortcuts or quick fixes. You will find something far more valuable. A system of habits that slowly, almost invisibly, transform the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you act under pressure. Habits that make you calm when others panic, focused when others get distracted, and steady when everything around you feels uncertain. And it starts with a simple shift. A shift so small that most people ignore it, yet so powerful that it changes everything. You stop reacting automatically. You begin to pause, to observe, to create space between what happens and how you respond. Because in that space lies your power. Think about the last time something upset you. Maybe someone said something you did not like. Maybe a plan did not go your way. Maybe you felt disrespected or overlooked. Most people react instantly. They defend, they explain, they get emotional, and in that moment, they give away their control. But a Stoic does something different. A Stoic pauses, not because they are weak, but because they understand that every reaction is a choice, and that choice, repeated over time, becomes a habit, and that habit becomes your identity. This is the beginning of becoming mentally unbreakable, not by avoiding difficulty, but by changing the way you meet it. Because life will test you, not once, but over and over again, in ways you cannot predict. And if your mind is not trained, those tests will break you. But if your mind is disciplined, those same tests will build you. And that is the difference between those who collapse under pressure and those who rise above it. One reacts, the other responds. One seeks comfort, the other seeks growth. One is controlled by life. The other learns to control themselves, and as you move forward, understand this clearly. You are not here to become perfect. You are here to become stronger, more aware, more intentional with every thought you allow and every action you take, because the moment you take responsibility for your mind, everything begins to change, not all at once, but step by step, habit by habit, until one day, you realize something that most people never will. Nothing outside of you has the power to break you anymore. The moment you stop reacting automatically is the moment you begin to take your power back. And yet this is where most people fail because they underestimate how deeply programmed their reactions really are. You might believe that you are choosing how to respond, but in reality, most of your reactions are habits formed over years, shaped by emotions, expectations, and the constant need to protect your ego. And this is exactly what Marcus Aurelius warned himself about when he wrote that you have power over your mind, not outside events, because he understood something that most people still ignore today. The world does not control you. Your interpretation of it does. And once you truly understand this, you begin to notice something subtle but life-changing. You begin to see the gap between what happens and what you choose to feel about it. For example, when someone criticizes you, the words themselves are neutral, but the meaning you attach to them creates your emotional reaction. Most people instantly feel attacked, disrespected, or defensive. But that is not because of the words. It is because of the interpretation they have trained themselves to apply. And this is where your first real habit begins. The habit of pausing, not reacting immediately, not speaking right away, not letting your emotions decide for you, but instead creating a moment of awareness. It might only be a few seconds, but in those few seconds, everything changes because you are no longer acting on impulse. You are acting with intention. Think about how different your life would feel if you did not react to every inconvenience, every opinion, every unexpected outcome. Imagine being in a situation where others are losing their composure, raising their voices, becoming frustrated, and you remain calm. Not because you are suppressing your emotions, but because you have trained yourself to see things clearly. This is not weakness. This is control. And control is built through repetition, through consistently choosing not to react the way you used to. At first, it will feel unnatural, almost uncomfortable, because your mind is used to immediate responses. It is used to protecting itself, to defending its identity, to proving itself right. But every time you pause instead of reacting, you weaken that old pattern and strengthen a new one. This is how mental strength is built, not through one big decision, but through hundreds of small ones. Epictetus, who was born into slavery and later became one of the greatest Stoic teachers, understood this deeply. He taught that it is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them. And if your judgments are automatic, then your emotions will always be out of your control. But if you begin to question your judgments, to slow them down, to observe them before accepting them, you create distance between yourself and your emotions. And in that distance, you find freedom. This is what it means to stop reacting, It does not mean you stop feeling. It means you stop being controlled by what you feel. You begin to choose which thoughts deserve your attention and which ones do not. You begin to see that not every opinion matters. Not every situation requires your energy. Not every moment deserves your reaction. And this realization alone can change the entire direction of your life. Because when you are no longer reacting to everything, you conserve your energy. You become more focused, more intentional, more disciplined, and over time, people will notice something different about you. Not because you are louder or more aggressive, but because you are calmer, more grounded, more in control. And that kind of presence cannot be faked. It can only be built. So the next time you feel the urge to react immediately, to defend yourself, to explain, to prove something, pause. Remind yourself that you always have a choice, that your reaction is not automatic unless you allow it to be, and that every moment you choose awareness over impulse, you are strengthening the one habit that most people will never master. The habit of controlling your mind before it controls you. As you begin to pause instead of reacting, something even deeper starts to reveal itself. And that is the truth about your emotions. Because most people believe their emotions are accurate reflections of reality. But in truth, emotions are often exaggerated signals, shaped by past experiences, insecurities, and unconscious patterns. And if you do not learn how to question them, you will always be controlled by them. This is where the next shift happens. You stop trusting every emotion you feel, not in a way that denies your humanity, but in a way that gives you clarity. Because feeling something strongly does not mean it is true. It simply means your mind is interpreting something in a certain way. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly that the mind has the ability to reframe any situation. And once you understand this, you begin to see emotions not as commands, but as suggestions. For example, when you feel anxious, your mind is telling you that something might go wrong. But that does not mean it will. When you feel angry, your mind is telling you that something is unfair. But that does not mean you need to react. And when you feel discouraged, your mind is telling you that you are not progressing fast enough. But that does not mean you are failing. This is the difference between being ruled by your emotions and learning from them. Most people never make this distinction. They feel something and immediately act on it, reinforcing the same patterns over and over again. But when you begin to observe your emotions without immediately identifying with them, you create a powerful separation between who you are and what you feel. And in that separation, you gain control. Think about how many decisions people make based purely on how they feel in the moment. Decisions they later regret, words they wish they had not said, actions that did not align with who they truly wanted to be. This is not because they are weak. It is because they have never trained themselves to step back and evaluate their emotions before acting on them. Epictetus taught that you should not say "I am angry," but instead say "I am experiencing anger," because this simple shift in language reminds you that the emotion is temporary. It does not define you, and it does not control you unless you allow it to. And this awareness is what allows you to remain steady even when your emotions are intense. Because being mentally unbreakable does not mean you never feel pressure. It means you do not collapse under it. It means you can experience frustration without losing control, disappointment without losing direction, and uncertainty without losing your sense of self. And this level of emotional independence is built through practice, through consistently reminding yourself that your first emotional reaction is not your final answer. You learn to pause, to question, to reframe. You ask yourself, is this thought helpful? Is this emotion leading me toward strength or weakness? Is this reaction aligned with the person I want to become? And over time, these questions become automatic, replacing the old patterns that once controlled you. This is how you become untouchable on an emotional level, not by avoiding challenges, but by changing your relationship with them. Because when your emotions no longer dictate your actions, you become stable in a way that most people are not. You become someone who can be relied on, someone who does not overreact, someone who remains calm when others are overwhelmed. And this kind of stability creates a quiet confidence, a presence that people can feel even if they cannot explain it. It is not loud, it is not aggressive, it is controlled, deliberate, and grounded. And the more you practice this, the more you realize that emotional control is not about suppression, it is about understanding. It is about recognizing that your emotions are part of you, but they are not in charge of you. And once you truly understand that, you take another step toward becoming someone who cannot be shaken by every passing feeling. Someone who chooses their response with clarity instead of reacting with impulse. Someone who is no longer at the mercy of their own mind. Once you begin to question your emotions instead of blindly following them, another hidden layer of control reveals itself. And that is your need for approval. Because for most people, this need operates silently, shaping decisions, influencing behavior, and limiting potential without ever being fully recognized. People adjust their words, their actions, even their identity based on how they think others will respond. And over time, this creates a subtle form of dependence where their sense of worth becomes tied to external validation. And this is where many lose their strength, not because they are incapable, but because they are constantly seeking permission to be themselves. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject. And yet, in modern life, people often give more weight to the opinions of strangers than to their own inner judgment. They check for approval before making decisions. They hesitate to act unless they feel supported. And they measure their success based on how others react to it. But the moment you begin to see this pattern clearly, you realize that this need for approval is one of the strongest chains holding people back. Because when your actions are guided by how you want to be perceived, you are no longer acting from truth. You are acting from fear, fear of rejection, fear of criticism, fear of standing alone. And this fear creates hesitation. And hesitation weakens your ability to act decisively. This is why the next habit you must develop is detachment from approval, not in a way that makes you careless or disconnected, but in a way that centers your decisions on your values rather than on other people's reactions. You begin to ask yourself a different set of questions. Not, will they like this? But is this right? Not, will they approve? But is this aligned with who I am becoming? And this shift may feel uncomfortable at first, because you are stepping away from a system that has influenced you for years. A system where approval feels safe and rejection feels threatening. But as you practice this detachment, something powerful begins to happen. You start to experience a new kind of freedom. The freedom to act without constantly second-guessing yourself. The freedom to speak without filtering every word through the lens of how it will be received. The freedom to make decisions based on clarity rather than fear. Epictetus taught that if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. And while this may sound extreme, the meaning behind it is simple. You cannot control how others perceive you. And if you try to, you will always be adjusting yourself to fit expectations that are not your own. But when you accept that you cannot control perception, you stop wasting energy trying to manage it. You focus instead on what you can control: your actions, your thoughts, your principles. And this is where your strength becomes visible, not in a loud or attention-seeking way, but in a quiet, grounded confidence. People may not understand it at first. They may question it. They may even resist it, because most are not used to seeing someone who is not influenced by external validation. But over time, that consistency builds respect, not because you are trying to impress, but because you are no longer trying to. And this is the paradox of detachment. The less you seek approval, the more your presence carries weight, because it is rooted in something deeper than opinion. It is rooted in self-control. And as you continue this path, you begin to realize that your worth is not determined by how others see you. It is determined by how you show up, by the standards you hold yourself to, by the discipline you maintain when no one is watching. And this realization removes a significant source of pressure from your life, because you are no longer performing. You are simply living with intention. And when you reach this point, you take another step toward becoming mentally unbreakable, because you are no longer dependent on something as unstable as other people's approval. You are grounded in something far more stable: your own judgment, your own principles, your own control over how you choose to live. As you detach from the need for approval, you begin to notice something that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. And that is discomfort. Because the truth is, the moment you stop chasing approval, you are left alone with yourself, your thoughts, your habits, your discipline. And for many people, that silence is uncomfortable. But this is exactly where your next transformation begins, because discomfort is not something to escape. It is something to understand. Most people are conditioned to avoid anything that feels difficult. They seek comfort in distractions, in easy choices, in short-term relief. And over time, this avoidance weakens them, not physically, but mentally. Because every time you avoid discomfort, you reinforce the belief that you cannot handle it. And that belief slowly becomes your reality. But a Stoic sees discomfort differently, not as a threat, but as a form of training. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that what stands in the way becomes the way. And this idea changes everything, because it reframes obstacles not as interruptions, but as opportunities to build strength. Think about how you respond when things do not go your way, when plans fall apart, when you feel pressure, when something requires more effort than you expected. Most people resist. They complain. They look for an easier path. And in doing so, they miss the very moment that could have made them stronger. But when you begin to accept discomfort as part of the process, your relationship with difficulty changes. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" And you start asking, "What is this teaching me?" And that simple shift turns every challenge into a form of growth. This does not mean you seek suffering. It means you stop running from it. Because the reality is, life will present you with discomfort whether you want it or not. And your ability to handle it determines your level of resilience. Epictetus taught that difficulties show what people are. And when you face discomfort with awareness instead of resistance, you begin to see yourself more clearly. You see where you are strong, where you hesitate, where you still react emotionally, and where you need to grow. And this awareness allows you to train your mind intentionally. You begin to do small things that build your tolerance for discomfort. You choose discipline over convenience, focus over distraction, effort over ease. You follow through even when you do not feel like it. You stay consistent even when motivation fades. And over time, these small actions compound into something powerful because you are no longer dependent on feeling ready. You act regardless of how you feel. And this is one of the most important shifts you can make. Because feelings are temporary, but habits shape your life. When you rely on motivation, you will always be inconsistent. But when you rely on discipline, you become steady, and that steadiness is what creates real strength. Imagine becoming someone who does not avoid difficult conversations, who does not give up when things get uncomfortable, who does not look for shortcuts when the path requires effort. That kind of person is not easily shaken, not because life is easier for them, but because they have trained themselves to handle what others avoid. And the more you lean into discomfort, the more your confidence grows. Not a loud or performative confidence, but a quiet certainty that you can handle whatever comes your way. Because you have faced difficulty before, and you know you can do it again. This is how pain loses its power over you. Not by disappearing, but by becoming something familiar, something you understand, something you can move through without losing control. And as this mindset becomes part of who you are, you realize that discomfort is no longer something to fear. It is something that sharpens you, strengthens you, and prepares you for the challenges ahead. And in that realization, you take another step toward becoming someone who does not break under pressure, but grows stronger because of it. As you begin to lean into discomfort instead of avoiding it, you enter a stage where your mind is tested in a different way, not through obvious challenges, but through pressure, the kind of pressure that builds quietly in everyday life. Deadlines, expectations, uncertainty, and the constant noise of a world that demands your attention. And this is where many people lose control again, not because they are weak, but because they have never trained themselves to stay calm when everything feels overwhelming. Pressure exposes the truth about your mind. It reveals whether you are guided by discipline or driven by impulse, whether you can remain focused or become scattered, whether you respond with clarity or react with confusion. And this is why mastering your mind under pressure becomes essential, because no matter how strong you feel in calm moments, your real strength is measured in chaos. Marcus Aurelius faced this reality constantly. leading an empire while dealing with uncertainty, conflict, and responsibility. Yet he reminded himself that the mind can remain steady regardless of external conditions. And this idea is what separates those who stay composed from those who fall apart. Most people allow pressure to dictate their state. When things become difficult, they rush, they overthink, they lose focus, and in doing so, they make situations harder than they need to be. But when you train yourself to stay calm under pressure, you begin to see things differently. You slow down instead of speeding up. You focus on what matters instead of everything at once. You act deliberately instead of reacting emotionally. And this ability is not something that appears suddenly. It is built through consistent practice, through learning to bring your attention back to the present moment, again and again, even when your mind wants to drift into worry or distraction. Think about how often your thoughts jump ahead to what could go wrong. How often you replay situations in your head, creating stress that does not even exist yet. This is where pressure grows, not from reality, but from the stories you tell yourself about it. And when you recognize this, you gain the ability to interrupt that pattern, to bring your focus back to what is actually happening, to deal with one step at a time instead of everything all at once. This is how clarity is maintained under pressure, not by eliminating difficulty, but by controlling your attention. Epictetus taught that you should not seek for events to happen as you wish, but wish for events to happen as they do. And in doing so, your life will go smoothly. This does not mean you give up on effort. It means you stop resisting reality, because resistance creates tension, and tension clouds your judgment. When you accept the situation as it is, you free your mind to respond effectively instead of reacting emotionally. And this is where your power becomes visible. Not in perfect conditions, but in challenging ones. Imagine being in a situation where others feel overwhelmed, where decisions need to be made, where pressure is high, and instead of panicking, you remain centered. You assess the situation clearly, and you take action without hesitation. This is not luck. This is training, and the more you practice staying calm under pressure, the more natural it becomes, until it becomes part of your identity. You become someone who does not get easily shaken, someone who can think clearly when it matters most, someone who does not lose control when things become difficult. And this kind of mental discipline creates a level of confidence that is grounded in experience, not in words. Because you know that no matter what situation you face, you have the ability to handle it. And as this habit strengthens, you begin to notice that pressure no longer feels like something that threatens you. It becomes something that sharpens your focus, something that brings out your best instead of your worst. And in that shift, you take another step toward becoming mentally unbreakable. Not because life has become easier, but because you have become stronger in the face of it. As you learn to stay calm under pressure, something changes in the way you carry yourself. And it is not something you announce or display. It is something people begin to notice without you saying a word. Because real strength does not need to prove itself. It reveals itself through consistency, through composure, through the quiet control you maintain when others are driven by impulse. And this is where you begin to develop a form of power that is often misunderstood. a silent power that does not rely on attention, approval, or recognition. Most people associate strength with being loud, with dominating conversations, with making their presence known in obvious ways. But that kind of behavior is often rooted in insecurity, in the need to be seen, to be validated, to feel important. But when your mind becomes disciplined, you no longer feel that need, because your sense of control comes from within, not from how others perceive you. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to be like the rock that waves keep crashing over. It stands unmoved, and the raging of the sea falls still around it. And this image captures what silent strength looks like. It is steady, grounded, unaffected by the noise around it. And when you embody this, your presence changes. You do not react to every comment. You do not engage in unnecessary arguments. You do not feel the need to explain yourself to everyone. Instead, you observe, you listen, and when you speak, your words carry weight because they are intentional, not impulsive. This is where many people struggle, because silence feels uncomfortable to them. They feel the need to fill every moment, to respond to everything, to prove that they are involved. But the ability to remain silent, to choose your words carefully, is a sign of control, because it shows that you are not driven by the need to react, but by the decision to respond only when it matters. Epictetus taught that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. And this principle becomes powerful when applied consistently, because when you listen more, you understand more. And when you understand more, you act with greater precision. And this precision is what makes your actions effective. Instead of spreading your energy across many directions, you focus it where it has the most impact. You do not waste time trying to impress. You invest time in improving. And over time, this creates a noticeable difference between you and others. While others are distracted by opinions, you are focused on progress. While others are reacting emotionally, you are thinking clearly. While others are seeking validation, you are building discipline. And this difference does not need to be announced. It becomes evident through your actions. People begin to trust your judgment, not because you demand it, but because you demonstrate it. They see that you are not easily influenced, that you do not change direction based on pressure or opinion, that you remain consistent even when circumstances shift. And this consistency builds a form of authority that does not rely on position or status. It is based on character, and character is revealed through repeated behavior. The way you respond, the way you handle pressure, the way you stay grounded when others lose control. And as this becomes part of who you are, you realize that power is not about controlling others. It is about controlling yourself. It is about having the discipline to act according to your principles, even when it is difficult, even when it goes unnoticed. And this is what makes your presence strong without being forceful, influential without being aggressive, respected without demanding respect, because it is built on something that cannot be faked. Consistency over time. And the more you embrace this silent power, the less you feel the need to prove anything to anyone, because your focus shifts entirely to your own growth, your own standards, your own control. And in that shift, you become someone who does not seek attention, but commands it naturally, not through noise, but through the quiet strength that most people never develop. As you begin to embody this quiet strength, there is one realization that changes everything at its core. A realization that most people avoid because it feels uncomfortable to face. And that is the awareness of how limited your time truly is. Because no matter how disciplined you become, how calm you remain, or how strong your mind grows, there is one fact that remains unchanged. Your time is finite, and this is where your perspective shifts in a way that is deeper than anything you have experienced so far. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that you could leave life right now, and that thought was not meant to create fear, but clarity. Because when you truly understand that your time is limited, you begin to see your life differently. You begin to question how you spend your energy, what you give your attention to, and why you allow certain things to disturb your peace. Most people live as if they have unlimited time. They delay what matters. They tolerate what drains them. They invest in things that have no lasting value, and in doing so, they slowly waste the very thing they cannot replace. But when you become aware of the temporary nature of life, your priorities change. You stop focusing on what is trivial. You stop engaging in unnecessary conflicts. You stop allowing small inconveniences to control your emotions, because you begin to realize that your time is too valuable to be spent reacting to things that do not truly matter. This awareness does not make you passive. It makes you intentional. It sharpens your decisions. It strengthens your focus, and it gives you a sense of urgency that is not rushed, but purposeful. Epictetus taught that you should conduct every act of your life as if it were your last. And while this may sound intense, its meaning is simple. Act with intention. Act with awareness. Act in alignment with who you want to become. Because when you live this way, you remove regret from your life. You are no longer drifting through your days without direction. You are choosing how you spend each moment, and this choice becomes one of your greatest sources of strength. Because when you understand that your time is limited, you stop seeking validation from people who do not matter. You stop postponing your growth. You stop waiting for the perfect moment to act. You begin to move with clarity, making decisions based on what is meaningful rather than what is convenient. And this clarity creates a powerful sense of calm, because you are no longer overwhelmed by endless possibilities. You are focused on what truly matters. Imagine living each day with the awareness that your time is not guaranteed, not in a way that creates anxiety, but in a way that brings focus. You would speak more honestly, act more decisively, and let go of what does not serve you. And this is the essence of this realization. It strips away the unnecessary and reveals what is essential. It reminds you that your life is not something to be wasted on distraction, on comparison, on things that do not align with your values. And as you integrate this awareness into your daily life, you begin to experience a different kind of freedom. Not the freedom to do anything, but the freedom to do what matters, because you are no longer weighed down by trivial concerns. You are guided by purpose, and this purpose does not come from external validation. It comes from within, from the understanding that your time is limited and therefore valuable. And when you live with this awareness, you become more present, more focused, more intentional with every action you take. And in that presence, you find a level of clarity and strength that most people never reach, because they never stop long enough to realize what truly matters before their time runs out. As this awareness settles into your mind, everything you have practiced begins to connect, not as separate ideas, but as a single way of living, because controlling your reactions, mastering your emotions, detaching from approval, embracing discomfort, staying calm under pressure, and moving with silent strength all lead to one final transformation, the formation of a new identity. And this is where most people stop short, because they treat these principles as temporary techniques instead of permanent traits. They apply them when it is convenient, when they feel motivated, when circumstances are favorable, but they do not allow them to redefine who they are. And without that shift, the change never becomes lasting. Marcus Aurelius did not write his thoughts to use them occasionally. He wrote them to remind himself daily of the person he was choosing to become. And this is the difference between knowledge and transformation. Knowledge informs you, but identity shapes you. When these habits become part of your identity, you no longer need to force yourself to act differently. You act that way naturally. You do not need to remind yourself to stay calm. You are calm. You do not need to resist reacting. You have already trained yourself to pause. You do not need to seek approval, because your validation comes from your own standards, and this shift is subtle but powerful, because it changes the way you experience life. Situations that once felt overwhelming become manageable. Challenges that once felt intimidating become opportunities, and distractions that once pulled your attention lose their influence over you. And this is not because life has changed. It is because you have changed. You have built a foundation that is not dependent on external conditions, and that foundation gives you stability in a world that is constantly shifting. Think about the version of yourself that reacts impulsively, seeks validation, avoids discomfort, and loses focus under pressure, and compare it to the version of yourself you are becoming. Someone who is deliberate, composed, disciplined, and grounded. That difference is not created overnight. It is built through repetition, through daily choices, through the consistent application of these principles. And over time, those choices compound into a new identity. Epictetus taught that no great thing is created suddenly, and this applies to your mind as much as anything else. Every time you choose discipline over impulse, you reinforce your new identity. Every time you remain calm under pressure, you strengthen it. Every time you act according to your principles instead of your emotions, you make it more real. And eventually, there is a moment when you realize that you are no longer trying to become this person. You already are. And this realization brings a sense of clarity and confidence that does not rely on external validation, because it is based on experience. You have seen yourself handle situations that once would have overwhelmed you. You have proven to yourself that you can remain steady when others are not, and that proof becomes the foundation of your confidence. Not a loud or performative confidence, but a quiet certainty in your ability to handle whatever comes your way. And this is what it means to become mentally unbreakable. Not that nothing affects you, but that nothing controls you. You still experience life fully. You still feel, you still face challenges, but you do so from a place of control, awareness, and intention. And as you continue to live this way, these habits become inseparable from who you are. They are no longer something you practice. They are something you embody. And in that embodiment, you reach a point where external circumstances lose their ability to destabilize you, because your strength is not built on what happens around you. It is built on how you choose to respond to it, and that is something no one can take from you, because it has been built from within, through discipline, awareness, and the consistent decision to become stronger, one moment at a time. And now, as you stand at the end of this journey, there is one final truth to remember. None of this matters unless you live it, because knowledge without action changes nothing, and awareness without discipline fades quickly. The world will continue to test you. People will continue to challenge you, and your mind will still try to fall back into old patterns. But this time, you are not the same person. This time, you are aware, and that awareness is your advantage. Every moment from this point forward becomes an opportunity to pause instead of react, to choose clarity instead of impulse, to act with intention instead of drifting without direction. And the more you choose this path, the stronger it becomes, until it is no longer a choice, but who you are. So do not wait for the perfect moment. Do not wait until you feel ready, because strength is not built in comfort. It is built in action. Start now. In the next decision you make, in the next situation you face, in the next thought you choose to accept or reject. And if this message has resonated with you, if you feel that shift within yourself, then take a moment to commit to it. Not for a day, not for a week, but as a way of living. Stay connected to this mindset. Surround yourself with ideas that challenge you, that strengthen you, that remind you of who you are becoming. And if you want to continue this path, make sure you stay here. Channel subscribe and share this video, because this is where you will keep sharpening your mind, refining your discipline, and building the kind of strength that cannot be taken away. And as you move forward, remember this: you may not control what happens in your life, but you will always control who you choose to be in response to it. And that is where your true power lies. See you next video.